Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are going to discuss TDS on purchase of goods and demonstrates the process flow of how to apply this rule in Ginesys. First of all, let's have a brief introduction about the new rule that has been applied. It says that any person being a buyer who is responsible for paying any sum to the seller for purchase of any goods of the value or aggregate of such value exceeding 50 lakhs in an accounting year shall at the time of credit of such sum to the account of the seller or at the time of payment thereof by any mode, whichever is earlier, has to deduct an amount equal to 0.1% as income tax. To sum this up, a brief highlight that says the rule has been introduced under section 194Q and is going to be effective from 1st of July 2021. It's been applied on purchase of goods which will be applicable on the value exceeding 50 lakhs in a given financial year, and if such happens, the tax will be charged at the rate of 0.1%. Now let's move on to the changes that has been made with respect to this in the application. The first and foremost is the changes done in the TDS Section Definition. A new type field has been added to differentiate the TDS names among goods and service types. That is, all the existing services or the TDS name that has been created will be belonging to the type services, and post update the master creation for 194Q has to be done manually with tagging of all the eligible TDS sources with the respective TDS rates. As we can see in the application, under finance module setup, there is a section for TDS which has multiple forms that belongs to TDS source section and agencies. Under TDS section, we can see there are multiple TDS names created. We have added a column for TDS type which reflects that the TDS names created are belonging to goods or services. Let's see a type which already has been created by us, that is for purchase of goods, that is 194Q. We can see that TDS name specified at purchase of goods, the section is 194Q. The TDS agency has been selected, and this is the type column that has been added which displays two different values of goods and services. The selection over here will be mandatory henceforth for the creation of any TDS section definition, and if the section belongs to goods or purchase on items, then it has to be selected as type goods, otherwise services. Post update, user will have to create this manually and has to tag all the applicable sources like corporate, individuals or etc., and has to apply the TDS rate of 0.1% for those sources. Going forward, the next impact is on reflection of TDS type. The TDS type that we have added will be reflected on selection in various modules like vendor, customer, financial modules like others and employees, where we can see that we have added a column for TDS type and user needs to select this over here. Let's go through the vendor master. We can see the reflection over there. So in under procurement setup, we have a master for vendor. We will be creating a new vendor, say P001, that can be a Prakash Industries, say PIND. The class name is supplier and the ledger is for, say, sundry creditors for goods. Let's give a contact person name and mobile number. And we are moving directly to the financial tab, specifying the PAN number. Let's say it's normal registered, and moving to the TDS tab. Over here we can see that there is a checkbox for TDS applicable. We have to mark this as applicable and select the TDS source over here. As we know, government has provided an exception till the amount of 50 lakhs, that if any vendor is having an annual turnover with a particular organization up to 50 lakhs, then TDS won't be deducted in those cases. So we can specify the maximum limit over here and the exception, that with respect to the organization and the TDS name that we have created is a TDS purchase of goods, we can see that the type column has been added over here for the selection and filtration purpose. Even in the columns section we can enable this TDS type so that we can have a view that the selected one is of goods or services. Now we can add a row over here and specify the validity period, say till 31st March, and the maximum limit over here is 50 lakhs, and up to that maximum limit the TDS rate will be 0, that is TDS won't get deducted, so that we need to specify it over here as 0 and save this. We need to keep this in mind that after post updating this latest version, for all the vendors that is been expected to cross 50 lakhs, we need to configure this TDS applicable flag for them and mark this as applicable and specify the exception limit over here. Unless and until this TDS applicable is marked as applied, TDS won't be deducted in the purchase invoice, irrespective whether the vendor is going to be eligible or not. So in case if we don't know that whether the limit is going to be crossed or not, then we have to make this applicable for all the vendors post update. This is a one-time effort and has to be done manually. So the master setting or changes with respect to master has been done. TDS section has been created for 194Q and has been tagged with the respective vendors. Similar changes that I have shown over here in vendor master has been applied to customer master and financial modules for employees and others also. Now, while defining exception limits, there can be multiple scenarios. As the rule is applied in mid of the year, there can be 3 scenarios for defining TDS exception in the current accounting year. First is a new vendor is introduced post 1st of July. Then full exception limit is to be assigned, that is rupees 50 lakhs. In case the existing vendor has not crossed the billing for rupees 50 lakhs, then 50 lakhs minus invoice value raised. That is, suppose from the period of April to July, invoice is raised worth rupees 20 lakhs. Then in that case 50 lakhs minus 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs is need to be assigned as an exception for that vendor. Third scenario is any existing vendor for which bill is already raised above 50 lakhs. In that case, exception definition is not required. Note that every year this exception limit has to be defined for each vendor. From next accounting year, irrespective of the condition limit, definition should be for 50 lakhs. It is suggested that while defining for current year, add the exception range for next year also. So as we have seen that we have applied the TDS exception over here. So let's now understand how TDS rate is going to be applied. As we have seen that we have specified 2 different rates, that is, one is for 0%, that is in the vendor master exception, and the other is under the TDS section definition, that is 0.1%. So how this applicable amount is being calculated and how rate is been derived, we will go to understand this via this slide. So TDS rate is been derived based upon the vendor amount, and this vendor applicable amount is been calculated as per the TDS applicable amount for purchase invoice or TDS journals that has been manually created, or TDS reversal entry that has been created manually or automatically. Now after post update, version update, as TDS is not applied on any goods, so TDS applicable amount for purchase invoice will be 0, and for those TDS section, TDS journals and reversal entries will also be 0. So initially the total applicable amount will be 0, and henceforth that will be getting accumulated for with each creation of each purchase invoice and TDS journals. So system will check the sum of applicable amount for all the purchase invoices that are going to be made and all the TDS journals that are being made manually, or deducting from that TDS journal will be the TDS reversal entries that is being created. So in any given purchase invoice, the sum of all those previously created PI, journals and reversals plus the applicable amount of that invoice will be considered for the exception limit check. Now if all the summation of all these values is within the exception limit, that is below 50 lakhs, then the TDS rate will be populated from the exception master, that is 0%. That is, TDS won't be deducted from that purchase invoice. But in case if the summation of all the values for that vendor in that given financial year exceeds 50 lakh, then the TDS rate will be populated from the TDS Section Definition, that is the general rate, that is 0.1%. So in case suppose 51 lakh is been invoiced for that vendor, then on rupees 1 lakh TDS rate will be charged, that is 100 rupees will be deducted as TDS for that purchase invoice. Now moving ahead, we will see that the changes that is been made in purchase invoice. As we know that purchase of goods is been invoiced through our module purchase invoice. This can be done after preparation of good receipt challan. So in goods receipt challan or GRN, we don't have any impact of this TDS applicability. After GRN has been made, on creation of purchase invoice, we can see the reflection of TDS and will get charged from this document. Over here in purchase invoice block, we have added a separate information block for TDS. So let's start with creating a good receipt challan, that is we have made for so let's copy a GRC to make it easier. So saving of challan, so GRC has been saved. Number 35, we will go to generate purchase invoice against this. Select the invoice, document number and scheme, document number and date. Over here we can see that TDS information block has been added. By default, TDS applicable, TDS source will get populated from the vendor master, and TDS name that if tagged with the vendor master will get populated from there. As we have tagged purchase of goods with the vendor master, is been auto populated. As there is only single record that is been tagged. In case of multiple, then we will need to select it from the lookups provided over here. So we can see that TDS has been applied. We can calculate the charge, and post charge calculation we can see over here in the panel information under item summary block. This information for TDS has been added, which reflects that the TDS applicable amount over here is 4,49,000. that is the gross amount for that document. TDS has been charged, that the different charges that has been applied and marked as TDS applicable is reflected over here, and the net amount on which the TDS is been applicable is 4,72,000, which is less than the 50 lakhs that has been specified in the exception. Hence TDS rate has been set to be 0 and TDS amount automatically will be 0. So no TDS journal will be created for this purchase invoice been created. As this is the first one, let's see another change over here in the purchase invoice that has been made, that the field for TDS include has been added over here, which reflects whether the charge is been applied on TDS, is been included in TDS or not. So if this charge has been required to be included in TDS calculation, then has to be selected at yes, otherwise no, which is reflected in the TDS charge amount. If set to be yes, then the value of this charge amount is going to be reflected in TDS charge amount as we have seen in the panel information. So we can see for all the charges, item level charges, the field has been reflected over here, and we can change the values from yes to no. This value for TDS applicable including tax is getting populated from the term definition. We can see from TDS term definition over here. It was already there, which we used to define with respect to, say, service categories that include in TDS columns are there, and we can specify which of the charges is been included in TDS calculation and which is not. As we can see that out of these 5 charges, 4 has been marked as included in TDS, and without tax charge, that is WO tax set, is to be not included in TDS. So the same is going to be reflected over here. And WO tax, if we see, is been set to be no, but if I want to change, we can change it over in the transaction event, that it can be marked as yes, and accordingly on change it will get reflected in the TDS net amount. We can see that TDS charge amount has been increased, and the total TDS net amount is 5,07,000, which is still far below than the exception limit, that is 50 lakhs. So I'm going to save this document over here and see how the system behaves with respect to generation of TDS journal. We can see that purchase invoice has been saved and nothing has been asked. We can open this in edit mode. The GRC has been auto created, and we can see that PI number 31 has been generated for this. Now I'll create another GRC. Let's increase the quantity over here. Okay, so it's now 44 lakhs, and on calculation of charges it's crossing the 50 lakhs limit. So now we are saving this challan and going to the purchase invoice generation. Specifying the document number, document date. TDS information is auto populated. We will calculate the charge. And we can see as all the charges are not been marked as TDS applicable, so it's under the limit of 50 lakhs. So let's change it over here and make this charge as applicable. See, as soon as the TDS amount is crossing 50 lakhs of limit, the TDS rate is exceeding the vendor exception, So TDS rate is getting populated from the TDS source definition, that is 0.1%, and we can see that TDS amount that is going to be deducted is 5069 rupees. Now on saving of this document, we can see that an alert is been displayed that applicable amount is exceeding the exception limit allowed up to 50 lakhs. Proceeding will change the rate as per normal, that is 0.1%. So please confirm whether to proceed or not. So I am going with yes. So purchase invoice has been saved successfully. Now let's move to purchase invoice. Over here we can see that the columns for TDS information has been added. The TDS applicable, TDS amount, TDS source, name, section, all has been added which reflect the values accordingly. So we can see over here that the last created purchase invoice is still in unposted state, has a TDS amount applicable as 5069 rupees. So now I will mark this as release, and the system over here prompts that auto TDS journal will be generated for this invoice. We can also check this from the edit mode. That posting or release of invoice can be done through edit mode also. When we mark this as release, so system displays a confirmation that record 1 released cannot be modified. Do you want to proceed? Confirm. And again the same message of exception limit is displayed from edit mode also. So proceeding with this, confirmation for TDS journal is been displayed. Do you want to continue? Yes. And system is asking for the TDS journal document numbering scheme that is going to be created. If there is a single document numbering scheme applied, then it get auto populated, and on selection of OK, TDS journal will be created. So we can see that against purchase invoice number 32, which has been released successfully now, TDS journal has been created for TDS 00025. So this is how in purchase invoice TDS journal will be created. We will be going through in details thereafter. So let's move on with the slides one after another so that we can check if we haven't missed anything in discussion. So we have already seen that auto creation of TDS journal is been done. That is purchase invoiced in TDS applicable, then on release of any document, if pending TDS entry is not found, then creates a new TDS journal entry. So as we have seen that Prakash Industries was a new vendor that has been created, and there was no pending TDS journal entries for that vendor. System was directly prompting for selection of TDS journal numbering schemes, through which a new TDS journal is been created. The TDS journal gets auto adjusted with the invoice amount. We can again have a check over here that in this purchase invoice, a new button has been added for adjusted TDS journal, which displays the TDS journal which has been adjusted for this invoice. So we can see over here that the TDS journal number 25 that was been created has been adjusted completely with this purchase invoice. So it's reflecting over here the applicable amount on which the adjusted TDS amount with this PI is been done. So automatic TDS journal gets adjusted with the invoice amount. Now in case there is some existing vendors for which TDS journals might has been created manually, or in a later stage, say any advance payment has been made which attracts TDS limit, and the TDS journal is been created against that advance payment. So in such cases purchase invoice, if TDS applicable, then on release of those invoices, system will prompt up with the window displaying the adjustment entries as pending. So the list will display all the pending TDS journals, as we can see over here in the right hand side, that the panel displaying the window with the pending TDS journal that needs to be adjusted, and user can select one or more TDS journals until the pending to adjust amount becomes 0. So thereafter existing journals can be tagged with the purchase invoice. Even after selecting all the journals, if the adjusted amount is still pending, then for the remaining amount system will create a new TDS journal through the same mode, as we have seen that it will be asking for TDS journal numbering scheme, and the differential amount will be created under the new TDS journal entry. So changes in item charge, we have already seen that TDS including TDS field has been added, and upon which the TDS applicable charge has been calculated. Then there is a panel information. We have checked that TDS applicable amount and all the information with respect to TDS has been displayed in the TDS panel information in the purchase invoice. The list view reflection has also been checked, that multiple columns have been added with respect to TDS, like TDS applicable, TDS amount, source name, TDS section in the purchase invoice, which will reflecting the TDS informations for the respective purchase invoices being created. Now going through the TDS journal. So as we have seen that TDS journal has been created against this purchase invoice and is also been adjusted. So we can move on and see that the created TDS journal. So it's been under the finance module, operations, TDS journal. So we can see over here TDS journal number 25 for Prakash Industries has been created. It's already in posted, so the document that has been auto created from purchase invoice will be in the posted state, as it's getting auto adjusted, so has to be in posted state. And we can see the purchase invoice number been reflecting in the reference number. The remarks been displayed as auto generated from the respective purchase invoice number, and the document amount is the TDS entry amount that has been created. We can also check over here the adjustment. So we can see that the purchase invoice number has been adjusted with the TDS amount deducted. Over here the TDS applicable amount is reflecting the amount on which the TDS has been created, and the TDS rate has been applied accordingly. So this is the journal information, TDS journal that has been created against the invoice, and we can check it out over here with respect to the reference number and the remarks reflecting the TDS number. Even in the TDS information narration field, we can see the remarks or the narrations provided for auto generated from entry number, that is the purchase invoice number. So both from the header and the detailed information we will be able to identify that this record has been auto generated against which purchase invoice number. So the brief summary, how to the steps to be followed, that is, first is to create a TDS section with the types of good as goods, then define the TDS rate for each sources applicable at the rate of 0.1% in TDS section definition itself. Then we can move on to the vendor master and mark the vendor as TDS applicable with the selected source. We need to specify the exception of 50 lakhs in the vendor master with TDS rate as 0%. Thereafter, while creation of purchase invoice, we need to select the TDS name, that is for the type goods that have been created in TDS section definition, and then on release of purchase invoice, select the TDS journal document numbering scheme to create the TDS journal entry that will be getting adjusted automatically with respect to that purchase invoice. So again, after generation of this TDS journal, the tax amount that is been deducted, that is 5,069 rupees, has to be paid to the government. So we can do this, or we can mark this payment with respect to the AP voucher. We can make this payment. TDS class, that is GSL agency, as we have seen. And we can adjust this with the pending documents. Yes, entry number 25 that has been created, we can select this. As we can see over here that the actual amount of 5069 has been selected, and we can save this entry for payment. That is TDS deducted from the vendor has been paid to the government through this voucher entry. So now again, if we go and check to the TDS journal, we will be getting a reflection over here. In the adjustment portion, we can see that there are two different legs. One is for vendor information, that is purchase invoice, against which that TDS journal has been created. That is, we have collected the tax from against this purchase invoice, and we have paid this through this voucher to the government. So the reflection of both ends can be viewed from this TDS journal, that tax has been collected as well as paid. So moving ahead to conclude this, there are few assumptions that we have taken for this TDS deduction. That is, first, that government has specified that the organizations whose turnover limit is 10 crores in the previous financial years can only be eligible to deduct the TDS for any purchase. Now this limit of 10 crores for the organization has to be self-validated. That is, if the organization is not having a turnover limit of 10 crores, then we need to define the TDS application in the respective vendors. If we are marking vendors as TDS applicable and we are configuring the TDS sections and all, then system will deduct the TDS journal for respective purchase invoice. The validation that whether the limit of 10 crores, the turnover of 10 crores has been crossed or not, is not been done by the system. This has to be self-justified, and then the application for TDS configuration should be done. Again, the exception limit is not validated on the advance payment of AP voucher. That is, the 50 lakhs exception limit is not been checked at the advance payment. By default, on creation of any voucher payment, system will consider the TDS rate that is been applied in the section from the section definition. The manual option is been provided over there for population of exception limit, but that will not validate the limit check that whether 50 lakhs has been created or not. If user proceeds with that exception limit, then it will be auto populating the value specified in the exception. Moving ahead is the case of unregistered vendor. That is, any vendor who has not registered with the under income tax, that is not having a PAN number or is not filing any TDS returns. So in such cases, government is saying that the TDS rate will be higher than what is been said as 0.1%. So in such cases, if the vendor is not been registered or is not been provided the PAN information, the exception for those has to be self-managed. That is, we can suggest over here to create a separate TDS source named as unregistered, and applicable TDS rate should be defined with respect to TDS source. So whenever that vendor which is been selected as for unregistered purchase, the applicable TDS rate for that TDS source will get populated. So purchase invoice in which the exception limit is been crossed in the partial value, like say purchase invoice worth rupees 49 lakhs is already been made, and now we are going to create an invoice of 2 lakhs, so which will be exceeding the exception limit of 50 lakhs by rupees 1 lakh only. So in this case, TDS will be charged on the full amount, that is on 2 lakh. The differential adjustment value cannot be done over here. So if that is been required, so separate purchase invoice for differential value has to be made, Again, purchase invoice is if made against the advance payment done, then that advance payment will not be counted for exception limit, because TDS adjustment with that advance is been done after saving of purchase invoice and after marking that purchase invoice as posted or released. And TDS journal is being created at the time of release, that is before adjustment with that advance payment. So as of now, this advance payment value will not get handled or managed against purchase invoice if been done. Going ahead, that both inventory and non-inventory items are being considered under taxation, as no separation is mentioned in the rule. Thereafter, TDS journal or reversal created against purchase return, debit note or credit note are not automatically adjusted. This has to be done manually. Any impact in purchase return, debit note or credit note is not been applied with respect to TDS. So any such occurrences has to be manually adjusted. Now from the seller side of view, that on purchase TDS is already been deducted, then the seller will reflect in his books the TDS that is been deducted. So if such TDS is deducted by the buyer, then the seller needs to account for as advance tax been paid. This entry he needs to do while preparing accounts receivable entry, and will remain a manual credit journal document that has to be created by him. So that's all from our side. In case of any doubts or any queries, you can get back to us. Thank you so much.